The lattice came down at the third bell. Zerak felt it in his teeth before he heard it. Plates the width of a landing barge slid inward from the rim of the ring and met with a sound like a mountain settling. The amber daylight narrowed to a slot, then a line, then nothing. Interior lamps woke in sequence along the curved wall, 200 apex predators and 9 feet of plate between them and the sky. Zerak turned to the ranks and spoke once. The drill is the oldest examination the Academy still runs, and the simplest. He did not explain further. They had all read the statute. Lock the building, remove the sky. Hold them there until the lattice is satisfied that not one of them has become dangerous. It measured pulse and thermal bloom and adrenal spike. It measured the chemical panic of a hunting animal that has discovered it is in a box. When every reading held steady for the full duration, the doors opened. When they did not, the doors stayed shut and the class failed together. 51 hours of it. Zerak had passed the trial as a cadet. It had cost him a tooth and most of a friendship. Vraxis stood across the floor and had not moved during the seal. That was the correct response. The Zythari knew it. That was why he had done it where an instructor could see. 8 feet of segmented black chitin. A thorax broad as a bulkhead. The cadet prime band bright on his left forearm. Warden. Vraxis articulated the word around his mandibles. The class is assembled and counted. The class is assembled. Zerak let his tail settle along the deck plate. The counting is not yours. A question regarding the count. Ask it after the first mark. It will be less useful after the first mark. The antennae angled forward. The liaison is inside. Zerak stopped walking. The ring was very quiet. 200 cadets holding still is a particular kind of silence. It has weight and texture, and the sense of many things deciding not to breathe at once. The liaison had a departure window, Zerak said. The liaison did not use it. Zerak turned his head slowly. That was how a reptiloid of his rank was expected to look at a problem. He found that the problem was standing at the edge of the assembly floor with her hands in her jacket pockets. Kozlova had put herself exactly where a sensible creature would stand during a seal, clear of the plate seams, back to a load-bearing rib. Sightline on 2 exits. Her navy jacket was pushed up at the elbows. Her braid had been redone recently and badly. Beside the ranks of chitin and scale and bone-ridged skull, she looked like something from a much less serious building. She raised one hand, palm out. Warden Zerak. I would have flagged it earlier, but you were mid-ceremony, and I did not want to be rude. You were logged as departing. I was logged as support species. Her voice was even and unhurried. The consonants sat heavy in the way of her homeworld. Support species are not counted in the trial roster, so nothing checked whether I had left. Zerak's tail moved once against the deck plate. It was a short, hard sweep that he did not authorize. Vraxis made a sound in his thorax. It was not a laugh because the Zithari did not laugh. Then she waits it out. 51 hours in the observation gallery. Warm and fed while the class earns its rank. The gallery is outside the lattice, Kozlova said. The lattice sealed at the third bell. I am on the wrong side of it. The clicking stopped. Zerak had been an instructor for a long time. He knew the exact moment a routine day converts into an incident report. It always arrived the same way, quietly, wearing the clothes of a small administrative error. Get me Ilvik, he said. The lattice spine ran the full height of the western tower. It was a corridor barely wide enough for Zerak's shoulders and lined floor to ceiling with the pale blue filament that made the containment field. It hummed. It always hummed. The Nauthri came down a service ladder when Zerak told him. His tentacles uncurled and swept forward. He was tasting the air the way a Nauthri does when the news is worse than the sentence containing it. The manifest dropped her. That is all this is. Ilvet was already at the wall console with his fingers moving. Support entries are cleared from the roster at the seal to save processing. Nobody removed her from the building because nobody was looking at her. It is an error of housekeeping and I will have it out in an hour. Then have it out. The display resolved. Zerak had seen the trial board 100 times, apex signatures arranged in a slow rotating column. Each was a soft bead of light that pulsed red if the cadet behind it began to come apart. Ilvek stopped moving. It counted 200, he said. There are 201. The last bead sat apart from the column at the top, and it was not pulsing at all. Beside it, the lattice had written the classification. Then it had failed and written what it had: unaccounted, apex, unresolved. That is a fault, Zerak said. That is a reading. Ilvek did not look away. The lattice scanned every living thing under the seal at the third bell. It found something with a predator's biometrics that matches no registered apex species. It cannot name her, so it will not release her. It will not open the doors while an unresolved apex is unaccounted for inside a containment structure. He turned. His tentacles had drawn in close against his jaw. Warden, that is not housekeeping. That is the lattice doing exactly what I built it to do. Provost Sarnoth received them in the upper gallery. The long windows had been swallowed by containment plate, and the only light came from the veins of the floor. When he turned, the 4 sensory tendrils around his mouth moved once and slowly. You've brought me a number, Sarnoth said. 201. The doors will not open at the final mark, not until the classification resolves. Then we have 51 hours to teach the lattice what a human is. His luminous eyes gave away nothing. Engineer, take the reference data from the Earth Compact Archive. There is no entry. Ilvek said it flatly. 240 species in that archive. Humans are not one of them. They came in under a trade instrument as a support signatory, and no one ever asked the classification office to look at their teeth. Then understand what you are asking of me. If I file her true, then in 9 days, every station in the compact wakes up to a new apex species. Trade positions change, escort requirements change. Half the border worlds will read it as a declaration, and they will read it as mine. Then file her low. The lattice will reject the entry as inconsistent with its own reading. The doors stay shut, and your class dies in a building I administer. Sarnoth folded his hands. Interview her. I want the entry built before I decide what it costs me. Ilvek interviewed her in the spine of the 12th hour. Kozlova sat on an equipment crate with her boots flat on the deck and her jacket folded across her knees. The blue filament light took the color out of her and made her gray eyes grayer. Answer plainly. The lattice will not accept modesty. Diet. Anything. Plants, meat, things that were neither. We ate what was in front of us for 2 million years, and we are not fussy about it now. Hunting method. We follow. Follow. On foot. On foot. She turned her scarred hand over and looked at it. Faster animals get away from us at the start. We keep walking. They stop to breathe, and we do not because we sweat instead. So we catch up. Then they run again and stop sooner, and we catch up sooner. That goes on until the animal lies down. She looked up. It is not a chase. There is no moment where we win. There is only the part where it stops being able to stand. Both tentacles drew in against Ilvek's jaw and stayed there. For how long? Hours? A day sometimes, and the animal knows it is being followed. Yes, that is most of it. When she had gone, Ilvek stood at the input plate and did not enter anything. Zerak found him there. You have 8 fields. I have 8. Anatomy, diet, sensory range, lifespan, gestation, pursuit behavior, tool use, social structure. She did not lie to me once. The tentacles hung slack. The 9th is threat classification, and it cannot be self-reported. It has to be filed by a peer species that has met them under pressure and is prepared to put its own name against the number. Sarnoth can put his name against a number. Then read the rest of the requirement. Ilvek turned the plate toward him. A threat classification filed against a contained apex needs a containment certification attached. Somebody who has held that species under seal has to certify that it was in fact held, not that it was locked in, that it was held. He raised his amber eyes. Warden, that would be you. And you have 39 hours to find out whether it is true. The Academy went to reduced cycle at the 18th hour because sealed buildings run hot. The lamps dimmed to a quarter. Ration issue dropped to 1 pull per cadet per cycle, and the queues at the nutrition bay stopped being orderly by the second issue. Water came off the reclamation loop and tasted of the loop. Cadets slept in the corridors because the bunk rooms held heat, stacked along the walls with their tails and claws drawn in, and every time a plate ticked in the ceiling, 400 eyes opened at once in the dark. At the 30th hour, Vraxis came down to the lower deck because the water pressure on the cadet level had failed and found the reclamation valve already open. She was standing in the dark to do it. The emergency strips gave nothing but a grey line along the floor. She had a shelf bracket in both hands, bent once already, seated against the valve wheel as a lever. The wheel had been fused for 2 cycles, and the maintenance crew had marked it for the yard. Vraxis stopped in the hatchway and did not announce himself. She set her boots. She pulled. The bracket bent further and did not slip. She reset her feet and pulled again, and something in the wheel gave a quarter turn, and she stopped and breathed and did it again. Quarter turn, breathe, quarter turn. She was not fast, and she was not strong, and she did not stop. It took her a long time. When the wheel came free, the pressure banged through the pipes above her head, and the corridor lights came back on standby, and she was looking directly at him. "It was seized," she said. "Your crew wrote it off. You have been at that for an hour." "Longer?" She dropped the bracket. It rang on the deck, bent into a shape nobody would straighten. "You have all the strength in this building. You do not have anything that keeps pulling after it stops working." At the 35th hour, a reptiloid cadet named Ossic came out of the nutrition bay behind her and did not stop to decide anything. Zerak reconstructed it afterward from the deck and the blood. Ossic had taken her at the shoulder from behind, and the claws had opened her left forearm from elbow to wrist when she got the arm up. She had not run. Running was the one thing that would have worked for him. She had gone in under the second swing, where his own mass could not follow, put the bent bracket through the soft seam behind his knee joint, and let his weight do the rest. Zerak arrived to find a first-year cadet on the deck with his leg ruined, and a human kneeling on his chest with the bracket in her hand, and both of them silent. She got up and put her right palm over her own forearm and pressed, and the blood came through her fingers anyway. "He will need the medical bay. The joint is open and dirty. Do not let them straighten it before they clean it. You did not call for a warden. There was not time to call for a warden." The medical bay was 2 decks down and running on standby light. Ossic lay on the long table with his legs strapped and packed and his scales gone, the pale bone color a reptiloid cannot fake. "They will ask me at the review why I did it. I do not have an answer that sounds like one." His tongue flicked once and came back slow. "I came out to the bay and she was ahead of me in the corridor, and my legs had already started. 4 years of instruction and my legs had already started." Zerak said nothing. The boy was working towards something and would lose it if interrupted. She could have gone left. There was a hatch on her left, and I watched her see it. She let me close the distance because closing it put me inside my own reach and outside my own balance. I did not understand that until I was on the deck. The pale scales flickered toward color and failed. And she was not angry. That is the part. She put me down the way the yard crew shuts a valve. Zerak looked at him a long while and gave him nothing. Then, because he could not help it, he looked at the ceiling in the direction of the board 4 decks above them. Her bead had not moved. At the final mark, the whole academy assembled in the ring. The ranks were dressed and silent and waiting for the sky. The lattice hummed. The plates did not move. The board above the assembly floor woke and printed a single line across the curved wall in letters 4 feet tall. Containment held. 1 apex predator remains unaccounted for. 200 heads turned. They were looking for the thing among them that the building was afraid of. At the edge of the floor, Kozlova stood with her left forearm wrapped in field tape and her jacket over the other arm. She sighed and raised one hand. "That is going to be me." Nobody dismissed the class. That was the thing Zerak would remember afterward. 200 cadets stood in the ring under a ceiling that was not going to open, and no one gave them an order because no order existed for this. He crossed the floor to her. Vraxis came with him and Zerak did not send him back. "You will explain that," Zerak said. "The lattice found me at the 3rd bell and could not file me. It has been holding the doors on my account since then." She had not taken her right hand out of her pocket. "I assumed your engineer would clear it." He cannot clear it. No, I am beginning to see that. Above them the board changed. One bead in the rotating column flushed red, then a second, then 11 at once, and the column began to turn faster. They are flaring, Vraxis said. They are learning the doors do not open. Zirac watched the count climb. That is the same thing. The plates in the western arch groaned and slid a handspan inward. Every head in the ring turned toward the sound. The lattice was not simply holding the outer seal now, it was tightening. A containment field that cannot resolve an apex inside it does the only remaining sensible thing. It reduces the volume that apex can occupy. Warden. Vraxis's mandibles opened and did not close. It is closing the building. Ilvek had both arms inside an open panel when Zirac reached the spine. Down the corridor a sector hatch fell and locked with a flat concussion that Zirac felt through his feet. Do not speak yet, I am counting. Counting what? Doors. It has taken 9 sectors. It will take the lower deck next because the lower deck has the fewest exits, then the cadet corridors. The tentacles hung slack against his jaw. It will keep going until she is standing in a room it can hold, and then it will hold that room forever, 6 hours, perhaps 5. Then find me a peer species that will sign the 9th field. I have spent 39 hours on that. Ilvek pulled his arms out of the panel and put 3 documents up side by side. That was what a Nouthri did when he wanted a fact to be unmistakable. Earth has applied for classification 3 times. Here is who said no. A mining consortium that had 1 human survey team on a contract world for a season, a shipping guild, a border world defense council whose file is 4 lines long. Give me the 4 lines. They declined to file a threat classification for Earth on the grounds that no honest number would be accepted by the compact, and a false low one would expose them to liability when it was corrected. Ilvek's amber eyes came up. That is not cowardice, Warden. That is 3 separate parties looking at the same animal and deciding it was somebody else's signature to ruin. So the classification office did the convenient thing and filed her as support, and nobody has looked at it since. Another hatch fell somewhere below them. The cadet corridors went at the 4th hour of the tightening, and that was where the class came apart. Zirac got there to find 60 of them pressed into a hall built for 20. The hatch at the far end had come down mid-cycle and taken the ventilation with it. The lamps were at a quarter. The heat made the air taste of scale and chitin and old water. And somewhere in the middle of it a second year had started striking the bulkhead with the flat of both hands over and over. In no rhythm at all. Warden. Vraxis had his back to the sealed hatch and his arms out, and he was holding the front rank off it with nothing but his own bulk. They believe the far wall is thinner. It is not thinner. I have told them. The second year hit the bulkhead again, and a bead somewhere above them turned red, and the sound of it going was worse than the blow. That was the drill, not the dark, and not the heat. It was 60 predators discovering at the same moment that the building had stopped being a building and become a jaw, and every one of them reaching for the same wrong answer. Zirac went into the middle of them and put the second year on the deck with his tail and stood over him until it stopped. Then he turned around and looked at 60 faces in quarter light and understood, with a clarity that stayed with him for the rest of his service, that nothing was wrong with any of them. They were behaving exactly as their species had been shaped to behave. Every one of them knew the walls were closing. Every one of them was going to fail. She was in the lower corridor when Vraxis found her, and she was walking toward the closing sectors rather than away from them. He put himself in her path. 8 feet of segmented chitin in a corridor built for cadets. The pale emergency strips threw his shadow the whole length of the wall behind her. Stop! She stopped. You will go to the medical bay and you will be sedated. Vraxis said it the way an order sounds when the one giving it has no authority to. Deep sedation. Your readings drop. The lattice loses the signature it cannot name. A sedated apex is still an apex. It lobbed me at the 3rd bell. It is not looking for a heartbeat. It is looking for an answer. Then I will take you to the outer arch and put you through the seam. That would kill me. It would kill the problem. Yes, she nodded slowly. It would. The corridor was very quiet. The filament hum came through the wall. Vraxis did not move. His mandibles worked, and his antennae stayed forward, and his great clawed hands opened and did not close, and the whole time she simply stood and looked at him and waited to see what he was going to do. That was the part he could not manage. He had trained 4 years to hold still in a sealed building. He had been ranked first in a class of 200 for exactly that. He had faced instructors and pressure plates and dart rooms, and he had never once flared. He flared now. He felt it happen. His thorax heaved and the segments along his sides pulled tight, and somewhere above him a bead turned red with his name under it. She had not lifted a hand. The field tape on her left forearm had gone dark at the edge. "You are not afraid of me," he said. "No. Why? Why? Because you are trying to decide. Things that are going to hurt me do not decide. They are already moving." She stepped past him, and he let her. "You will be a good warden. Go and stand somewhere with a door." Vraxis did not go. He stood where she had left him until the strips dimmed, and the next hatch came down behind him and sealed the corridor at his back. He had been told since his first year that the trial measured restraint. He understood now that it had never measured anything of the kind. It had measured how much of the room a creature believed belonged to it. His own answer had been all of it. Hers had been none. Sarnoth had the 8 fields in front of him when Xeric came up to the gallery for the last time. Ossic's medical report sat beside them. The Arathi read both again while the tower ticked and settled around him. The first year opened her arm to the bone and she put him on the deck without raising her pulse, he said. "That is my 9th field. I've been sitting here 2 hours trying to find an honest number smaller than the one the machine already wrote. Then file it and sign it." "I will file it, and I will sign it, and I will spend the rest of my service explaining it." The tendrils settled. 3 border worlds sit on this examination board. In 9 days they will read my name under a new Apex classification, and they will understand it as a position I have taken. It is a position I have taken. You could refuse. I could refuse and be remembered as the provost who let a class die rather than write down what was standing in his corridor. He turned from the sealed window. "Go down to the spine. The engineer needs your mark under mine, and I would rather he had it before the lower deck goes." The sector hatches were down to the spine itself by the time they filed it. Xerac stood at the console with the input plate open under his claw and read the field 3 times. Ilvek had entered the 8. Sarnoth had entered the 9th and had not told anyone what number he used, and nobody had asked. The last line waited. "Containment certified by Warden of the Sealed Trial." "You are hesitating," Kozlova said behind him. "If I put my mark on that line, I am telling the compact that Kalthir Academy held a human under seal for 51 hours. His tail was still against the deck. "I am not certain that is what happened. I am not certain the seal is the reason you are standing there." "It is not." "Then I would be signing a falsehood." She said nothing at all. She stood in the corridor with the blue filament light on her and her jacket over her good arm and waited, and the waiting was worse than any answer she could have given him. Xerac thought about the tooth he had lost in this building as a cadet, and the friend who had lost more than that. He thought about 200 beads turning red, while one stayed white at the top of the column. He thought about a first year on a table 2 decks down saying that his legs had already started. He put his claw on the plate. The lattice took 11 seconds. He counted them. Then the schema closed, and the archive accepted, and the board above the assembly floor cleared itself for the first time in 2 days and printed 1 line across the curved wall. Apex classification received. Species human. Status resolved. Containment lifted. The plates in the ring came apart at the seam, and the amber daylight came down through the widening slot onto 200 cadets who did not cheer, not one of them. They stood in their ranks and watched the sky come back, and every eye in that building was turned on the small figure walking out under the arch. The trial results posted that evening. 200 cadets flared. Everyone. The class failed the sealed trial for the first time in the Academy's history, and Kalthir suspended the examination pending review. 1 signature on the board had held steady from the 3rd bell to the last mark. It belonged to a candidate who had never been entered. Sarnoth found her at the departure gate as the light went orange over the quad. "You did not miss the window?" "No." "How long had you planned it?" "Since the third rejection." She watched the transport come down over the ridge. "We asked to be classified 3 times and were returned incomplete 3 times. Nobody would sign the field, not because they thought we were harmless, because signing it meant admitting they had been sharing a table with something they had never bothered to measure." She shrugged. "So I stopped asking and stood inside the best containment lattice in the compact and let it measure me instead. Machines have no reputation to protect." Zerak came out to the gate as the ramp lowered. She stopped at the foot of it and offered him her hand in the human manner, and he took it, claw and all, and it was small and warm and entirely without pressure. "The engineer showed me your entry. Pursuit behavior. You keep walking until the animal cannot stand." His slit pupils narrowed. The doors were shut. The archive was shut. Every office in the compact had returned you incomplete for 11 years. If I had not signed, if Sarnoth had not filed, how long were you prepared to wait? Kozlova looked at him for a moment. "Warden, we were always going to be standing here." She went up the ramp, and the transport took her off Kalthir and out through the arch of a building that would never again be able to say it did not know what she was. 90 days later, the compact revised escort requirements for Earth-flagged transports, and 3 border worlds withdrew from the Kalthir Examination Board. Sarnoth countersigned the withdrawal receipts himself. He has not been asked to sit on a classification panel since. The archive entry stands in the compact record to this day. 9 fields: species human, anatomy unremarkable, diet unrestricted, pursuit behavior sustained and terminal, threat classification filed by Provost Sarnoth of Kalthir and never once revised, containment certified by Warden Zerak. He has kept a copy. He tells the new cadets on their first evening that the certification is the only lie in it, and that he signed it anyway, and that the lattice is a very good machine which asks one question and one only. Not whether the animal is dangerous, whether the animal has decided that it is contained,